Section 12. Broken Hearts in the Halls. Monday arrived all too soon. Fat and Anne were walking through the hall together to third period when he stopped her before she stepped into class. "Hey," he said often. It was almost breathed. It seemed as if he were letting off pressure from something building up and it was relieving just to say it. She turned to him. He stared at her long flowing hair over her red jacket hood, her arms cradling her books, and her hands with her long slender fingers barely visible outside the jacket sleeves curled around her books. Her eyes seemed to always have so much to say. He disconnected from the feeling before she were to notice. A strong urge to speak of his ailments surfaced in him, to speak to the murderer about their murder. Making his abrupt decision, he grabbed her and held her tightly as he smelled the soft scent of her hair, then whispered in her ear, "I'm sorry I ever loved you." Anne remained silent, but placed her head on his chest and stared at the wall with her heart sinking into the pit of her stomach. She felt shame for what she had done, but she was still struggling with her feelings for the boy who lived with her now and who cared nothing for her. However, when she thought of this, it didn't feel right. It felt like it was completely true, but at the same time more of an excuse than anything. The puzzle piece, though similar to the shape needed, still didn't fit. This mattered not right now at this moment. Right now, she felt she needed to do what she could to comfort him. He didn't deserve for what he was feeling, and she felt it was her fault. She didn't have the right words to say, nor did she know that there was actually anything she could say. Love is involuntary and uncontrollable. Though it's a powerful emotion, it can't be tamed. It burns like a wildfire in the dry forest with heavy wind gusts, spreading, consuming, infecting, incapable of destruction, and can be blinding. The heart can overcome the brain, a tool necessary to make the proper decisions. Anne decided she wanted to speak to her sister about this and see what she thought of it. Once Anne explained what she thought what was going on in Fat's actions, Violet stared at Anne for several long moments before speaking. "Anne, he sounds like he's obsessed with you and that you like it." This hit Anne hard on a fresh bruise from earlier when he said his heartbreaking statement. That's not true, Anne thought. Is it? She was only 14 after all, and she did not understand these emotions. At least not yet. Anne sat at the glossy white table inside the town's chicken restaurant with Violet. A large box of potato wedges to share sat before them, and each of the girls had a chicken breast on a plate. Anne stared at the grease-ridden chicken breast soaking into the plate, causing her stomach to tighten into a knot. She had eaten so much chicken recently, she was sick of it, and didn't want to even have the thought of it, no matter how it was prepared. She was here with Violet on a mission for her parents, but Violet wasn't aware of that. Ruth and Vince asked Anne if she could get her sister to eat, as they had noticed that she had been losing weight. They were concerned she may become ill or, God forbid, have a miscarriage. So Anne, among many other times, asked Violet if she wanted to go somewhere to eat and that she was buying. In reality, it was their dad paying, but Anne was given the money so that Violet would agree to going without feeling forced or knowing that true motive. Violet did not always agree, but when she did, Anne knew that she had to eat the food too or it would look suspicious. Anne peered back down at her plate bearing the fried chicken. She tore a chunk off of the breast and chewed it slowly, thinking of anything other than what she was eating, then washed it down with pop. Journal entry, October 13th, 2006. I have to eat now with Violet so that she'll eat because she's starving herself. She's depressed, but the baby Zora could die. I think I mentioned at some point, Fat cut himself fairly badly. He loves me so much, and this has made me feel so guilty for it. This is my fault. Today he hugged me and whispered in my ear, "I'm sorry I ever loved you." What do you even say to that? I've destroyed a person and I never meant him any harm. What do I do? Section 13. So, do you wanna? The following day after school, Anne made her way into her bedroom when the phone rang. She picked the phone up in her room when she saw the number on the caller ID. "Hey," she said. She tossed her backpack on the floor, then laid down in the middle of the floor, staring up at the ceiling. "Hey," he said. "What you doing?" "I actually just got home. Good timing." "I am pretty damn skilled, am I not?" he said proudly, preceded by a laugh. "You're stupid." "Nuh-uh," he said, mimicking a child who'd just been scolded. Yes, huh?" she smiled. He grew silent, and she carefully listened, but only the feedback she received was white noise coming through the other end. It sounded similar to the way the industrial lights in a gymnasium sound when you're alone. "Fat? What's wrong?" She waited a moment, but he didn't respond. "Hey." "Anne?" "Yeah?" She waited and there was another pause, but she knew that what was about to happen. His serious tone had returned. He was about to break her heart again with something he wanted to get off his chest. Anne braced herself. "Will you marry me?" he asked coldly. She stared at the ceiling in complete awe at how lifeless and indifferent he sounded when he asked such a question. It sounded almost as if it were a recording over an old tape recorder. Her heart began racing. This was the first time someone had asked her to marry them. She felt overwhelmed and afraid, yet it made her feel good, loved, and needed. She briefly imagined how life would be, but she could not get her thoughts past how they were now, just kids. This and the blackness of her future returned where she couldn't see anything and quickly shook the thoughts from her head. I'll think about it," she smiled. Her lips nonetheless had difficulty moving. Her mouth felt dry. During the remainder of the call, it had lightened tremendously, but she felt awkward until the end of their conversation. She was caught in a hard place from what she wanted, what she thought, what she felt, and what she understood. In a way, she did not want to be with him due to the overwhelming and frightening feeling he brought with him, but in the same sense, she felt drawn to him. Why am I so drawn to him? Do I love him? Do I just really like him? Is there something more than love? Something more complex? What are we? What the hell are we? The questions she cycled through as they resurfaced every night as she lay awake in her bed, listening to the faint sound of the TV from her sister's room next door and watching her ceiling fan turn slowly. Journal entry. October 14th, 2006. Hey, self. Thought I'd write. Thursday night, Fat asked me to marry him. He's dead serious, too. I told him I'd think about it. I wasn't sure how to even talk when he asked me that. He loves me so much, and he's off at his dad's wedding after all in Alabama right now. He told me that he already missed me. Confusion and sadness. Seriously, there's gotta be more than sadness all the time. I'm very upset right now, but happy? Doesn't make any sense, and I keep asking myself why I just can't let it go. I can't seem to get a frickin' grip on myself, and then when he comes around, he knocks me from the rope I've been climbing. Section 14. Loss and Gain. Over time, Fat was still talking to Anne, though he often brought up his grief and talked to her about it, but she didn't know what to do. She was 14 and he was 16. They were still young and did not know really what was going on between them. Was something strong developing? Something scary? Perhaps not to him, but to her. Kids can be so naive. Anne was not only going through emotional confusion and struggle, but her home life was not making things any easier. Anne overheard her parents speaking rapidly in a hushed tone. She leaned in close to the door to listen. I know, Ruth, I know. You act like I have no clue what's going on in this household. Vince, I'm sorry. I get where you're coming from, but we have no money, Ruth. We've spent it all on a whole lot of bullshit and nothing to show for it. Now we're in the hole, especially since that boy came to live with us. There was a brief pause. After nearly 5 minutes of silence, he turned to face Ruth again, who sat at the edge of the bed and nervously picked at a thread on her purse. We're 2 months behind on our mortgage payments right now. We're losing the house, Ruth. Anne stepped away from the door carefully. She didn't wish to hear any more. Quietly, she made her way back into her room and shut the door behind her to avoid the inevitable. Maybe not next month or the following month, but soon. Soon or not, she was afraid and certainly not ready. She lay down on the floor in her favorite spot and drug her journal out to begin writing. The pen she held in her hand scribbled the words down quickly. As she wrote, the words began to blur. She wiped the tears from her eyes and tried to proceed, but before long she had to do it again, and again. After becoming frustrated, she threw the pen down. It slid across and skidded across the carpet halfway across the room. She scooted herself up against the wall. She could hear the muffled shouts from her parents continuing to argue. Anne's mind buzzed with other hurtful memories. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them, and rested her forehead against them. She drifted off to her religious beliefs and had always been told that every person was placed on the earth for a reason and a special purpose. At this time, she questioned her God why she was even put here and for what damned purpose it was. Things were beginning to fall apart around her, and nearly all of it she could do nothing about. She was powerless in every situation. "I don't want to do this. Make it stop," she whispered softly as the tears began streaming down her face. Journal entry, November 27th, 2006. We're 2 months behind on the house payment. It's $1,000 a month. We're going to lose the house. I'm losing everything. Right now, the words I'm writing are blurring and I'm crying. I just want to be held at this point. I feel alone in the dark and have no one to talk to. I don't belong anywhere. I don't deserve anything. I deserve no one. I don't know why I was even put here, but it must have been a pretty bad mistake. Fat and Anne lay in his bed in the dark with nothing but the moonlight to shine through his tiny window. The radio on the headboard above played Shinedown, Save Me. The TV in the living room could be heard faintly, and occasionally Constance would light a cigarette. "I've been thinking," Fat began. He lay on his side next to Anne, propping his head up on his hand. "About?" Anne smiled and mimicked his body language. "Well, I've been thinking how we do everything together. You know, how Astrid and Sebastian are together, but we're not," he said as he looked away. Anne looked away as well. She was unsure what to say. What he had said was not entirely false, but also not exactly true. Though she had known him for less than a year, she still did not feel ready to begin dating him. Again, for that matter. Something about him did not feel right when she considered them being together. It was a sense of dread that felt like it awaited for her. At the same time, it was the simplicity of how she could be herself with him. How good this felt being a person, and knowing that it felt safe to be the real you. He was nice to her. This was much more than what Sebastian gave her, even on his good days. Fat was there, and she knew he would always be there somehow and in some fashion. Her thoughts went to the memories of the laughter they shared together over the past 7 months, and how this feeling she always looked forward to each day. She looked forward to him every day. She peered back up to him, and his eyes were already on her. They always stared intently, like they were searching for something specific, and something very dear to him, but it seemed like something that he felt sure that she had. A something that only she had, and he needed it, and desperately. This look always scared her, though she tried not to show it. She knew she needed to leave her once behind, and to be the person who treated her right. Then again, she thought of how this didn't seem to fit entirely. She missed Sebastian, and she wanted to be with him, but this felt like another misunderstanding within her mind. Something that Fat had, or that he was the reason that she was so attracted to him. Not because he spent time with her and was good to her, but because he was something special to her in some way. "Right," Anne whispered. Do you want to give it another chance? Maybe see where it goes? Fat asked her in his low, deep voice. Yes. Journal entry. March 12th, 2007. Oh my god. Today was so awesome, okay? I spent the night with Fat on a school night. Well, I had to wake up at 5:30 and to get on the bus by 6:30. So we're getting ready and missed the bus. We called Mom and asked her to take us. When we get there, Fat and Seb decided they wanted to lay out. So here I am like, oh my god. So tempting, but I'm cursed with never getting by with stuff. Anyway, I was like, 7 a.m. and we headed out from the school. We walked back across the road of the church. We walked all the way until we got to Old Woodson's Mall. Then we got back on the highway. We got picked up by some creepy lady and dropped back off at his house. It was technically his neighbor's house, but it worked out the way we wanted to and sneaked around. Then we headed to the lake where Astrid and I got drug in by those bastards. When we got back to his house, we all got in the shower screaming. God, it was incredible. I gotta admit, it's one of the best days I've had as far back as I can remember. I love my friends. I got back together with Fat, though. I hope I made the right decision. I don't know if I did or not, but I guess we'll see. Section 16. A Snake in the Basement. A week had passed since Fat and Anna had got back into the relationship. His attitude had suddenly changed, and he began acting strangely towards her, but she couldn't recall anything that she may have done. She walked down the school hall with him, but had difficulty keeping up with him as he pushed his way through the crowd. "Hey!" Anne said. He continued walking, but didn't look back. "Hey!" Anne said much louder this time. Fat made no indication that he heard her. "Fat, hey!" Anne said loudly. She put her hand on his arm when he turned and jerked away from her. He furrowed his brow and stared at her hatefully. "What? Did I do something to make you mad?" "I feel like a fucking object." He shouted loud enough for others to turn in the hall and stop for a moment. Anne shrunk where she stood, feeling her ears growing hot. Fat turned as he shook his head and shoved his way through the crowd before she could say another word. She watched him disappear around the corner, feeling tears welling in her eyes. She wiped her face with her jacket sleeve and took a deep breath before she headed to class. That evening, she was sitting at the cabinets in the corner of the kitchen and peered inside at the different cans of soup, vegetables, and broths sitting in the dark and considered what she might settle for. Sebastian trotted up the stairs and stepped in the kitchen. "Hey, Ann," he said with a smile. He turned and rummaged in the fridge, pulling out a pop, then turned to her. "Say, would you mind coming downstairs to talk to me for a few?" Anne, who had received nothing but the cold shoulder from him in every form since he began dating Astrid, was shocked and it showed. "If that's all right," he added in. I guess so," she said, returning her sights back to the labeled cans of preserved healthy foods. "Cool." Sebastian then made his way back downstairs to his room. Anne noticed that he had left the door open, and he normally had it shut. Anne waited nearly 20 minutes to give herself time to eat and also make him wait, since she felt spite towards him for being such a bastard for the past several months. Once she finished, she went downstairs to see what he wished to talk on. Anne walked through the door and spotted him sitting on the small love seat that he had in front of the TV downstairs and on the console that she let him borrow, and yet he still hadn't returned it. He was playing Morrowind. "Hey." "Oh, hey," he said, turning around briefly. "Close the door, will you?" She shut the door and stood there watching him play. He moved his character up the side of a hill on the game, jumping on a dark elf's hut and then on a high rock. He then turned his character around and jumped off the cliff onto the ground. The screen turned a faint red and Anne heard a bone snapping sound, then glanced back at Sebastian with his head confused. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm leveling up my acrobatics. Every time I jump off this cliff, it levels up my acrobatics faster than jumping and doing stuff." "Oh, okay," she said offhandedly. She tried not to seem interested, though the game did indeed interest her. Something else she was trying to do was to not relax around him. He continued to play for another 5 minutes before he began speaking. I'm sorry for the way I've been treating you lately. Anne remained silent. I've just been thinking a lot lately. She's really beginning to piss me off with her jealous bullshit, and she's always up my ass. Anne said nothing but was genuinely surprised he had said something about Astrid like this. He never spoke ill of her, so this was a first. I miss the way things used to be. Between us, he went on. You and I. He glanced her way for a moment to see her reaction, but to his disappointment, she kept her composure. How dare you say shit like that to me after the way you've been such a fucking asshole for months? How dare you? Now she's the one that's bothering you and you miss us? Yeah, right. He frowned and turned back to his game. It's been a while since you and I have hung out, he mentioned. She felt a pang of hurt inside of her chest, with longing for what she had wanted, and attempted to convince herself that she should know better, and that Astrid wasn't just putting up for him right now. That's all it is, Anne thought. He doesn't miss me. I really can't right now. I'm feeling tired already and still haven't showered. Anne lied. She did need to shower, but she wasn't tired. Catch you later then? Sure, Anne said dully, shutting the door behind her. Anne made her way back up the stairs to the bathroom and hopped in the shower. The hot water felt good and allowed her to finally relax. On the plus side, this also gave her some time alone to think things over and ponder. Why the hell is he doing this to me? I still have feelings for him, but he has a girlfriend, and I have a boyfriend. He's been a complete asshole for a long time now and living in my house, of all places. Who does he think he is? It still hurts. But he's toxic. I know he's toxic, and he always has been. Though he lives with you, Anne, you need to avoid him as much as possible. Nothing good is going to come of this. As well as I know him, he has no good intentions. That came to her mind when she thought of how Sebastian made her feel, but then recalled the last thing that he had said to her in the halls at the school. She was lathering shampoo in her hair when she suddenly stopped. Wait, has Sebastian been feeding him lies? Surely this can't be a coincidence. As her anger rose, it quickly fell back into sadness. Am I really this much trouble? Is life always going to be this confusing and dramatic? I thought they were best friends, but best friends don't do that to each other, do they? She thought back to one of her first friends that she made in 4th grade named Shelby. Anne could not recall a time when she did this to Shelby, nor vice versa. Then again, they were so young, and she had moved to West Tennessee to finish her remainder of the grade school where her father lived. It had been nearly a year since they had gotten to see one another. Anne finished showering and cut off the water. She wrapped the towel around her once she was done drying off and opened the door. Sebastian must have been listening and waiting for the right moment, as he appeared at the top of the stairs when she opened the door to the bathroom in a towel and stared at her. She looked away hatefully, then disappeared into her bedroom, locking the door behind her. Flinging the towel on her bed, she began rummaging through her dresser for clothes when she heard footsteps outside her door. The doorknob to her room jiggled lightly. "What?" she yelled irritably. "I just want to talk." "You just saw I was in a towel. I obviously haven't had time to get dressed." "Oh, I know," he responded, and without the slightest hint to hide his intentions. She did not respond. Instead, she found the clothes she wanted to wear, got dressed, and left the door locked. After several further attempts to get her attention, he finally called her a bitch and went back downstairs. She sighed to herself and walked to the bedroom window to peer out at the gloomy gray sky. Why are you doing this to me? Anne still felt the entire mess was somehow her fault. All she wanted was to just get along with everyone and prayed to make the right choices. She wanted to be friends with everyone and make her own feelings go away. This way, it would not cause her to make any more problems in others' lives. Thoughts of harming herself surfaced in her mind as she watched the dark clouds floating onward, but never allowing enough to let the sun shine through before dusk. March 22nd, 2007. Journal entry. I'm so confused. Fast said yesterday, I feel like a fucking object. I don't feel that way about him, but I understand why he would feel this way. I want to be with him, but I'm so damn confused. Sebastian keeps telling me he wants to be with me and he's fed up with his girlfriend's jealousy and keeps bringing up how things used to be with us. God, I wish he'd stop. I hate myself. I'm making everyone miserable, including myself, and I don't know how I feel. Sebastian is only confusing me more than I already am, twisting my words and thoughts, and then there's my thoughts of Fat. They keep in a safe distance from all the others. They're kept deep within, but yet they in themselves are still the most confusing of them all. What do I do? Sebastian continued his attempts on Anne every day. With each turn down from Anne, he slapped her in the face with insults and hurtful ones, might I add. Anne felt terrible and did not know what to do or who to turn to. She ended up breaking it off with Fat again, telling him that she just needed a little bit more time than what she thought, and apologized for jumping back into the relationship so soon. Though she hid in her room most of the time, Sebastian found other means of communicating with her and never ceased with his advances. It was beginning to get to her. Sebastian began insulting his best friend and his girlfriend daily, along with treating them poorly when he spoke to them. When Anne was not breaking, though he did not realize how much he had cracked a wall she had put up, he decided to get closer to her emotions and started telling Anne that he loved her. This not only hurt her, but she felt humiliation from both Sebastian and Fat now, both telling her that they loved her. What of Astrid? She essentially fell out of the picture, and Anne had really begun to like her. Anne pitied her for what was going on, but ensured not to tell Astrid. Anne felt that Astrid did not need the extra pain from the other ends. And she also knew that Astrid had bad things going on at home as well. Astrid did not need more weighing down on her when she already had enough trouble as it was. Anne sat in the middle of her room on the floor in her usual spot and tried to focus on the drawing in front of her. She held her pencil in between her ring finger and pointer finger, balancing the tip on a portion of her ring finger just above her fingernail, with the middle finger pressing down on the pencil, and gripped it with all of her fingers and thumb. She thought of how during early years when she was writing, the teachers would scold her for not holding the pencil the proper way and that she would never learn to write well this way. The teacher's method of writing involved holding the pencil mainly with their ring finger and thumb, with the others supporting it. Anne found this tiresome to write in this fashion and preferred the way that she felt most comfortable to her. She still wrote this way today and had received many compliments over the years how tidy and neat her handwriting was. The phone rang, startling Anne out of her elementary memories. She glanced up at the phone but did not read the caller ID. Assuming that it was likely her mama calling to talk to her mom, she dismissed it and remained where she was. Moments after the phone quieted, there was a heavy knocking on her door. Anne dropped her pencil and jerked, turning around and grimacing at the door. "Anne!" Violet shouted. "Open your stupid door!" Anne sighed, realizing that she had left the door locked these days, so Sebastian couldn't come in unannounced. She opened up her door to see her sister standing there and then shoved the phone into Anne's chest. Anne jumped, causing the phone to drop to the floor. Violet turned and went back into her room. Anne locked her door back. "Hello?" "Hey." "Hey," Anne smiled. She was genuinely surprised to hear his voice. "I was wondering," Fat began. He paused a moment as if he were not sure how to go on before he continued. "If you wanted to come stay the night with me tonight." And here we are, a couple of broken hearts filled with loneliness and addicted to this pull between us. What are we anyway? We are no longer a couple, and yet you still ask to see me. I would love to. You make me feel like I'm actually wanted and not just, what my body has to offer, but what I myself have to offer. My time and yours. I would love nothing more than to stay up all night with you talking like we always do, that I can't do with any other human being. You are an anomaly, and I love that about you. Anne uttered through her thoughts. "If you don't want to, it's fine. I don't want you to feel pressured or anything." Sure, yeah. I'd love to." The tone in his voice relaxed. "Okay, I'll let my mom know to come ahead and come get you. Let me check with my mom first and see. I'd feel bad for your mom if she had to come all the way to get me and then I can't go. Anne stated she knew Constance just had come home from work when she glanced at the clock. Nah, she doesn't mind. She actually was the one who suggested you coming. I was just talking about seeing you before I called. Oh, okay, well, hold on just a second. I still have to ask him if I can come. Hold on. Anne put the phone down on her nightstand and flitted through the door and stopped at her parents' door knocking lightly. Hey, can I stay with Fat tonight? His mom said she'd come get me. Anne could hear low murmuring followed by silence. You know we don't like you staying with boys, but alright. You have to go to school, though. Keep in touch. Okay, thanks, Anne squealed. She ran back into her room, slamming it by accident and yelled sorry as she knocked the phone off her bed table and then scrambled to pick it back up. Hey, Anne breathed. If she's cool with it, I'll go ahead and I'll get ready. Fat pulled the phone away from his ear, and Anne could vaguely hear him telling his mom and giving her the okay. Okay, she said she'll be down in there in about 30 minutes. Anne could hear a hint of excitement in his voice and could tell that he was trying to hide it. Alright, I'm gonna hop off here and I'll get ready. See you in a few. Fat chuckled. Alright, see you soon. Anne made it a point not to tell Sebastian or let him know that she was leaving for the night. Once Anne and Constance arrived at the house, Anne made her way into the hallway. She could see him sitting on the edge of the bed, blaring music on his laptop. He peered up and smiled. He placed the laptop on the headboard, grabbed the bags from Anne's hands and tossed them aside, then grabbed her and twirled around. Without hesitation, she joined in on the dance and laughed. From his laptop, she could see that he had gotten onto Pandora radio and noticed the song right away. Breaking Benjamin's Evil Angel. Fat grabbed both of her hands now, posed as if he were going to dance at a formal ball, stuck his nose in the air, and then flung her around. They were both laughing at the finesse they certainly did not have for this type of dancing. Her foot slid in one of her bag slings, catching and causing her to fall into the bed, but nearly cracking her face on the bed frame. She turned around wide-eyed from the hairbreadth of escape and her mouth in awe. Are you all right? Yeah, but did you see that? I almost died. Well, in that case. His body stiffened up as he opened his arms wide and fell on top of her, squishing her into the bed. Oh my God, why? Because. He's muffled through the bed. You needed it. I did? Yes. He lifted up off of her and held himself up by his fists in the bed, staring down at her. As he did, he watched her face return to its beautiful and relaxed state, then that cute little blissful smile that she wore that he loved so much. He watched her sea green eyes grow bright when they met his and stared back at one another as if there was nothing else worth looking at. She did not protest him hovering over her. A heaviness when one feels as though they need something that they cannot have, but not a soul is within sight, so one would consider taking it anyways. He fought with himself a moment before leaning up from the bed and held out his hand to help her. She glanced at his hand and with a chuckle, then gladly accepted his offer. Later that night, their light and playful conversation took a turn to deep and serious. Anne and Fat lie on his bed, facing one another in silence when Fat decided to break the ice. He began. He glanced around his room as if searching for the words he wanted to say, then back to her again. I bought you a promise ring before we broke up. He paused now, studying her face. Anne's face turned into an expression of awe, letting her mouth drop slightly as she let out a small gasp, followed by her face falling. How much did you pay for that? She asked nervously. She eyed him with seriousness that was equally mixed with grief and curiosity. 150, he said, biting his lip. This time he looked away and did not meet her eyes again. Anne lay there for a moment before she could find any words. Shame washed over her as her body felt like it had turned into gelatin, feeling a tingling sensation in her fingertips. Though he had not known her that long, he already wanted to promise her for marriage. Consistent he was, with his compliments and loving gestures and trying to please her. Yet here she was, lying in his bed with him. He was the one who invited her over here, and to make her happy. He knew how unhappy she was, and though he did not have much to offer but his time and company, he still offered it anyway. He still offered this to her selflessly. This was exactly what she needed, his company and his time. He did not know how much this meant to her, especially during these times of young. Anne glanced back to him, who still had not yet met her eyes. Placing her hand gently on his chin, she brought his gaze back on hers. He searched in her eyes for answers that he simply did not seem to have anymore when he noticed a small smile creep up on her face. Her eyes seemed to not stare at him, but stare in him, to his very soul. Those damn blue and green eyes with a little yellow ring around the center circling around the black pits that stared out from the vessel she inhabited. If he were to draw too close to her, he would begin to feel as though he were being pulled into her, unable to look away from her, but he wanted it this way. For her to comfort him, to be pulled into her. He watched her smile fade into pursed lips and sad eyes. Eyes that always said so much. They were always talking, it seemed. Always have something to say, and they always said so much. The language they spoke was foreign to him, but he was willing to learn if she allowed it. What are they saying right now? He wondered. He considered the shape of her pupils and the dilated state that they were in. He studied her facial expression and trying to piece it all together. It seemed silly, but her emotions did not appear to be like any other person that he had come across. They were somehow different. They seemed like an everyday thing, and yet when he looked close enough, he could see something else going on below the surface. A discussion with herself, an argument, a war, a screaming and confused soul calling out for help. Almost like me, he thought. The hair on the nape of his neck stood on end. Suddenly she lunged at him, embracing him in a hug, and broke his trance. All the pictures, words upon the walls that he had penned to study and analyze, all his charts that indicated patterns and perhaps not, all the mental notes taken along the way, all of it got blown away in a gust of wind that she always brought with her, and ending up having him blank for several seconds and completely overwhelmed. A tear ran down her cheek, but she did not allow him to see this. Anne squeezed him tightly, and for a moment he did not hug back. His hands raised as if they were not sure where to go, afraid to touch the intangible object that he so desperately wanted. This intangible had wrapped her arms around him and held him, an action in order to comfort him. She intended for this to happen and willed it to be so, and put forth the effort to execute that action. Surely she must have wanted this. She did not have to do this. Yeah, he agreed internally. He then slowly placed his hands around her, feeling the soft skin on her arms and her hair getting mixed up in the embrace. As she buried her face against him, hiding, he thought as he stared at the blank walls of his room. No. His eyes closed. He did not wish to see anything. All he wanted to do was feel this moment and feel it with all the intensity it had to offer. Grasp it and hang on tight, because it was untelling when this moment would end. Unfortunately, he knew that the moment would indeed come to an end, as all moments do. He was content where he was, for now. Journal entry, March 26, 2007. I think there's something wrong with me. I got with Fat and broke up with him again. What the hell's wrong with me? Sebastian told me I was stupid for being with him in the first place. What? Sebastian's the one who told me that Fat liked me and said I should date him, but now he's upset about it? Sebastian also said he loved me, and I'm not that stupid. He lies. It hurts, and it hurts a lot, but I know he's lying to me. Fat told me he bought me a $150 promise ring. God, I broke his heart so bad. What's even happening in my life right now? I literally can't make any decision without stepping on somebody's fingers or pissing off half the world. He asked me to stay the night with him. I feel like crying. Never mind, I already am. I have no words for how incredible but confused he makes me feel. Section 17. Lost. Violet finally had a baby girl that they named Zora, weighing in at almost 8 pounds. Anne unfortunately had the room next to Violet's, and the crying seemed like it went on for hours upon hours. It woke her often during the night, and she would hear it throughout the day while trying to do homework that she already had trouble understanding. Sebastian stopped going to school, and when Ruth began to try to take him by force, he refused. She physically could not make him go. He continued to miss until Ruth was summoned to court. Vince was not happy, and he kept telling Ruth that this boy was not worth it. The thing that Anne feared the most had finally reached the present. They were being evicted from the home that they were barely in for 5 years. Vince rarely spoke to his daughters and rarely spoke to Ruth. The only times Anne would see him speak to her mother was when there was plans needed to be discussed, and this was it. Vince, Ruth, and Anne went driving around for several hours each day in search of a new place to rent for now. However, they had little luck due to the size that they needed to house a family of 7. This included Zora, Bryce, and Sebastian, plus the original 4 in the family. Vince had finally given up on searching for something to house them all and decided to rent separately for Violet's new family, and then his own family, plus the boy. During this time, Bryce and Violet disappeared for several days, leaving Ruth to care for the baby. This took a major toll on Vince's sleep, which caused his irritability to rise even further. He began snapping at everyone who spoke to him, whether it be, "Hi, Dad," or "Would you like a pop?" Eventually, everyone avoided him the best that they could until he finally stopped speaking to anyone at all. He came home and would go straight to the bedroom, shut the door, and did not come out unless he needed something to eat, but then it was right back in there. Everyone was stressed. Anne was worried about her dad and afraid of him at the same time. She was too nervous to ask him if he was all right or to tell him that she loved him. Anne worried for her mom and what was going to happen with the court due to Sebastian. The baby was always crying, and Anne helped her mom as much as she could, but something about the baby crying made everything inside of her feel as though it were quivering. It was a terrible feeling. During this time, Anne was emotionally vulnerable. She had been talked into doing the unthinkable. This was certainly no excuse, but she could not go back and change this now. It had already happened, and unfortunately was something she could not undo, and she regretted every bit of it. She showered immediately afterwards and did not look at him or speak to him. She stayed in her room with her door shut and avoided everyone now. Anne sat against her closet door as she always did when she was upset, but this time was different. This time there was really nothing that could be done to change it. It was done. Her virginity was given to someone who cared not for her at all. It was supposed to be special for her husband, not him. Then her thoughts went to Astrid. Anne pulled her knees against her, wrapped her arms around her, and put her head down to cry. She cried for several hours until her eyes burned, her face swollen and red. She cried until it was difficult to breathe. Anne started failing her classes that she was already struggling in. She had trouble concentrating and retaining anything. She would take notes and try, but then when we would get home and pull her homework out, she merely stared at it until her eyes filled with tears and began to weep again. Through her weeping, she could hear crying from the baby, and if it was not the baby, it was her parents arguing loudly and throwing things. This only made her cry harder. She hated herself. She felt there was no purpose, and the fact that she knew that Fat would also find out, and he would likely never speak to her again. She had no one and nothing to pour herself into for release. The only release within sight was a knife that she had stored away in her dresser, and considered if she had what it took to go through with it. Waking each day to the same hell to face, only to go back to sleep and to repeat. Again and again. Autopilot was the only thing that kept her afloat as she drifted through each and every day. If only she could go back. Go back and make a few changes. Then maybe. Journal entry, April 26th, 2007. Sebastian got sent to court for missing so many days at school. We're about to get evicted on 5/17. We have to pack up and get out. We still haven't found a place. Dad says we can't buy another house and that we have to rent for now. He never talks to us anymore. He gets home from work and goes straight into the bedroom and shuts the door. I haven't spoke to him in over a week, though he looks at me every day when he gets home. It hurts. Sebastian took my virginity and I hate it. How could I have been so fucking stupid? That was supposed to be for my husband, not someone who gives no damns about me. And then there's Fat. I'm failing all my classes, and Mom said she's going to homeschool me to help me take care of the baby once this year is over. Violet finally had her on March 14th. Where is Violet anyway? Haven't seen her in several days, and Mom's had Zora. I've helped her some, but I hate the crying. I just wish everything would go away.